Some time later, they were standing in front of a makeshift cabin. Just like Changing Star's patchwork dwelling, the cabin was constructed out of mismatched stone blocks that had been scavenged from the ruins. It was reinforced with monster hides here and there, and seemed to be built slightly better than the rest of the hovels in the outer settlement. There was a large bestial skull hung above the door, its thick forehead split apart by a devastating strike of some sharp weapon. Glancing at the skull, Nephis took a step forward and knocked on the door. However, no response followed. Sunny sighed. Maybe she's not home. Instead of an answer, Changing Star frowned and banged on the door with her fist. The first strike was somewhat gentle, but by the last, the bestial skull was on the verge of flying off the wall. A sleepy and irritated voice sounded from the inside. "I swear to gods, whoever you are, you'd better be a nightmare creature." A few moments later, Sunny heard the sound of footsteps approaching the door. Before it opened, though, Nephis suddenly spoke. "Sunny, turn away." Hearing a strange urgency in her voice, he scowled and did as she had asked. "Your shadow, too. What is going on? Are we expecting trouble?" As he was staring away from the cabin, the creaking of wood informed him that the door was flung open. "Who the hell is— Oh, it's you!" He swore he could hear Neff's teeth grinding against each other. A few seconds later, Changing Star spoke, her tone especially flat. "Nah, put on a memory, Effie, please." "Wait, what? Why would she— Oh! When he was finally allowed to turn back, the last glimmers of ethereal light were yet to disappear from the fabric of Effie's provocatively short chiton. She wasn't wearing anything underneath either. "Here. Better?" The huntress was exactly the same as the last time he had seen her, tall, strong, and brimming with vitality. Without the bronze cuirass with leather terreuse, as well as other elements of the archaic armor, even more of her dewy olive skin could be seen. "So, you guys are back together, huh? Judging by how clean and shiny the other two look, I'm guessing that their stay in the castle was pleasant." Sunny glanced at Cassie, then said in a reserved tone, "Not particularly. Just like you said, the ambience there is, well, an acquired taste, I guess." Effie grinned. "Well said. Anyway, how can I help you?" Changing Star motioned at the door. "Can we come inside?" The unruly huntress glanced back, then shrugged. "Sure, why not?" Inside, the cabin was small and cozy. One of its corners was occupied by a large pile of furs that served Effie as a bed. At first glance, it didn't seem that lavish, but once it hit Sunny that each of the furs had come from the corpse of a nightmare creature, he quickly changed his mind. That was probably the most extravagant thing he had ever seen. Also, one could only imagine what went on between those furs. "Pure thoughts, Sunny. Focus." There was also a fireplace, a table with a single wooden chair, and a pair of sturdy chests. The rest of the space was occupied by various curios that the huntress had scavenged from the ruins over the years. There was no particular logic to this opulent collection except for the fact that each object had once caught her fancy for this reason or that. After the three of them were seated, Effie returned to her pile of furs, wrapped herself in one of them, and asked, "So, what's so important that you had to come and wake me up this early in the morning?" "Early in the morning? It's already noon." Nephis lingered for a few moments, then said, "You haven't hunted since the day we met, right?" Effie yawned, then said in a languid tone, "Nope. I'll go back into the ruins once my food runs out, which will be in a day or two, I think." "What? How?" The amount of meat she had butchered off those monsters was enough to feed a person for a couple of months. It was all gone already? Just how much did the vigorous huntress eat? Changing Star nodded. "When you do, come with us. Be our pathfinder." Well, she certainly doesn't beat around the bush. For some reason, Sunny had not expected Neff to be this direct. He had always imagined this conversation taking much longer before getting to its real purpose. Effie stared at them, then threw her head back and laughed out loud. "Ah, that's a good one. Do you want me to be your nanny too?" When her laughter died down, she shook her head and said, "No offense, kids, but you have just arrived in the Dark City. You are as green as it gets. Best hunters out here wanted me to become a part of their party, and I refused them all. Do you know why?" Neff nodded with a serious expression. "Most hunting parties share the spoils of their hunts. Each hunter keeps a part to eat and sells the rest to the people in the slum. But because of your flaw, you can't allow yourself to do the same. You need all the sustenance a hunt can provide. The more partners you have, the lesser your share will become. So, you hunt alone and never sell the meat of your prey, just their hides." Effie smiled. "I see someone has been doing their homework." Changing Star tilted her head a little and, not paying any attention to the irony in those words, continued. "We can solve that problem by—" However, the solitary huntress interrupted her. "Stop. Good guess, but you are wrong. That is not why I refused all those hunters." Nephis blinked, surprised. After a long pause, she asked, a hint of confusion in her voice, "Then why?" The smile disappeared from Effie's face. "Because they are weak. Every one of them is weak. Even the most successful of them are. And do you know why?" Something dark gleamed in her hazel eyes. "They are weak because Gunlag will never allow anyone strong to exist outside of his control. So, I am not going to be your pathfinder. Sorry, princess." Changing Star froze, obviously flustered by that answer. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again and awkwardly pressed her lips together. No matter how much she had honed her social skills during their journey through the labyrinth, this conversation still seemed to be too much for her. In the ensuing silence, Sonny suddenly spoke, his voice calm and slightly provoking. "He's allowing you to exist." Effie looked at him, raised one eyebrow with a smile, and didn't say anything. Finally, Nephis was able to compose herself. "We might be new here, but we are not weak. Between the two of us, Sonny and I had killed dozens upon dozens of awakened creatures in the labyrinth." The huntress interrupted her once again. "Even if that's true, that was there. Out here in the Dark City, things are very different." The two of them stared at each other, one with a relaxed smile on her lips, the other with stubborn flames burning in her eyes. "Oh, I don't like this." Eventually, Changing Star grimaced and said, "So, if we prove that we have strength, you might reconsider." Effie chuckled. "Damn, you say it like it's easy. You do know how many people can't even step a foot into the ruins, right? If you guys survive in this hell for a few years, maybe then we can talk again." Nephis looked at her for a while and then smiled darkly. "We will talk again in the evening. Then you will change your mind." Outside, the sun was already moving past its zenith. There wasn't that much time left before the sunset, so Sunny was really unsure about what Nephis could do to change Effie's mind before evening. However, judging by the determined expression on her face, Changing Star wasn't just throwing words to the wind. She had something specific in mind. He hesitated. "So, what exactly are we going to do now?" Neff glanced at him, white flames dancing in the depths of her cold gray eyes. Then she turned away and said, "Follow me." With that, she walked forward in the direction of the castle. "Castle? Why are we going to the castle?" Somewhat uneasy, Sunny gently took Cassie by the arm and hurried to catch up to Nephis. When he did, she suddenly threw over her shoulder. "Tell me about that Pathfinder again, the one who was accused of murder 3 days ago." "Hull." Sunny frowned, then repeated what he knew about the guy. When he was almost finished, she asked, "What's his aspect ability?" "Hull. He hesitated, then said, "He can make any weapon become incredibly sharp when it's in his hands, sharp enough to cut stone, maybe even steel. It's a very powerful combat ability." Huh. Changing Star was quiet for some time, then said, "What about his flaw?" Sonny shook his head. "That I have no idea about. People are very protective of their flaws, you know. Not everyone goes around telling everyone about their greatest vulnerability like that lunatic Effie." Cassie, who seemed to be very protective of him today, decided to support this claim. "Sonny is right, Neff. We don't even know what his own flaw is, remember?" Sonny almost stumbled and had to try very hard to not let any emotion show on his face. Cassie was right, of course. While changing Star and she had shared their flaws with him, Sonny never reciprocated the gesture, for obvious reasons. "That is true, but uh, can we not talk about that?" Nephis silently nodded and didn't comment on it further. It seemed as though her mind was on something else. Phew! Soon they scaled the magnificent stairs and were approaching the gates of the castle. Sonny was growing increasingly nervous about Neff's intentions. What is her plan exactly? Neff, what do you need us to do?" She shrugged, then said in her usual indifferent tone, "You don't really need to do anything. Just follow me and try to look, virtuous." Look, virtuous. What's that supposed to mean? The guards, standing watch in front of the gates, blocked their path with contemptuous and suggestive looks in their eyes. Contempt was directed toward Sonny, while the rest was directed toward the girls, of course. "Stop! What business do you have in the Bright Castle? Want to pay the tribute? Or maybe want to get paid instead? If you know what I mean." Both of them laughed, making Sonny's blood boil. Nephis looked at them with a calm expression, then said, "I want to go inside, but I'm not going to pay tribute." The laughter suddenly stopped. The guards looked at them with a bit of amusement, a harsh and dangerous light finding its way into their eyes. "Have you lost your mind, wench? Why are you here if you're not going to pay tribute? Stop wasting our time." Changing Star stared at them with no emotion whatsoever showing on her beautiful ivory face. Then she said evenly, "I'm here to invoke the right of challenge. I'm here to invoke the right of challenge. Wheelie Zindaf, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk." For a few seconds, everyone stayed silent. Sonny's heart was beating like a wild beast in his chest. Mad, she has gone mad. But no, Changing Star was not mad. Although Sonny liked to joke inwardly about how crazy Nephis was, she was anything but. In fact, her ability to remain cool-headed and rational in any situation was one of the main reasons that made her so dangerous, which meant that there was some opportunity she saw here that he didn't. At least he hoped that this was the case. Meanwhile, one of the guards frowned. "Stop joking around, little girl. Shut your mouth and get lost if you want to live." Neff didn't move. Instead, she said, "I'm not joking." The other guard stared at her, then shook his head. "Those slum rats have really all gone crazy, huh? I thought that this recent show would teach them a lesson, but it seems as though it did not." He sneered. "Listen, lass, the right of challenge is not a laughing matter. It's a fight to the death. No one is going to go easy on you just because you have a pretty face. Do you understand?" Changing Star simply nodded. The guard waited for a while, looking at her tall figure and the crude tunic that she wore. Then he grimaced. "I guess we'll have some entertainment today? Ugh, such a shame. With your looks, you could have lived in the castle without ever even needing to pay the tribute." Shaking his head, he turned around and gestured for the three of them to follow. The other guard stayed behind, a bewildered and darkly excited expression on his face. With the sound of the rusty chains swinging in the wind invading their ears, Sonny, Nephis, and Cassie passed beneath the hanging skulls and entered the castle. Inside, everything was exactly the same. Even Harper was still sitting behind his opulent desk, writing something on a piece of parchment. Hearing the sound of footsteps, he raised his head and threw a furtive glance in their direction. An expression of confused surprise appeared in his eyes. Sunless and Cassia, what are you guys doing back here?" Sunny felt the desire to palm his face. When he had said to the gaunt young man that they might see each other in the future, he certainly did not mean that that future would be on the same damn day. Not knowing about the thoughts raging in his head, Harper smiled. "Oh, did you guys get lucky and come into some shards? Back already to pay the tribute?" Sonny gritted his teeth and forced out a weak smile. No, not exactly." By the time the three of them were led to the grand hall of the castle, the news that there was going to be another challenge had yet to spread through the entire fortress. Because of that, there was no crowd there, just a few dozen people who had happened to walk past and heard the commotion. However, their number was growing with each minute. Standing before the entrance to the hall, Nephis was calmly looking forward, her thoughts a mystery. She seemed to be steady and collected. Sunny, on the other hand, was very nervous. Just what was Changing Star planning? Glancing around to make sure that no one could eavesdrop on their conversation, he leaned to her and whispered, "You're not really going to fight one of Gunlag's lieutenants, are you? Because that would be suicide." No matter how talented and strong Neff was, she couldn't hope to win against someone like that, at least not before absorbing enough soul shards to even the odds at least a little. Those people had not gotten to where they were by pure accident, too. They had talents of their own. Nephis didn't turn her head and simply said, "The walls have ears." Sunny gritted his teeth and was about to retort, but at that moment the guard that had led them inside appeared from the grand hall, threw a dark look at them, and spat. "Come on in, fools." Changing Star simply walked forward, leaving Sunny and Cassie no choice but to follow. Inside the hall, a small crowd of people was staring at the entrance. When they saw Nephis, a wave of confused whispers ran through their ranks. "Who is that? Never seen her before. There's something strange about that girl." The whole situation was much less ostentatious and theatrical than that on the day of Jubei's death. Most of the lieutenants weren't even here, not to mention the Bright Lord himself. Only the leader of hunters, Gemma, was sitting on the steps leading up to the empty white throne. On his face there was a slightly sullen expression. To Sunny's relief, Haris was nowhere to be seen. When the guard led the three of them inside, Gemma raised his head and glanced in their direction with a frown. "Did I hear it correctly? One of you three wants to invoke the right of challenge?" Nephis took a step forward, looked him right in the eyes, and answered in her usual indifferent voice, "I do." Her calmness was in direct contradiction with the heavy meaning behind those words. It was the polar opposite of the impassioned, scornful, furious speech of condemnation that Jubei had given in this hall 3 days ago. The confused frown on Gemma's face deepened. "You do know what that means, right, little girl?" She continued to stare at him without showing any sign of fear, then repeated, "I do." The tall hunter sighed. "Listen, it is indeed true that anyone has the right to invoke the right of challenge. But throwing your life away is a really stupid thing to do. I'm sure that you had to suffer a lot to make it this far. Everyone here did, pretty much. So how about you think about it some more and reconsider?" His voice wasn't unfriendly. In fact, it seemed sincere, as though Gunlaug's lieutenant really did not want to see her die for no reason. However, his words fell on deaf ears. Neff just tilted her head a little and said, "No need." Gemma sighed again, then shook his head. "Fine, have it your way then. Who are you here to accuse?" Sunny already had the idea. That's why he wasn't surprised to hear her next words. "I am here to accuse the Pathfinder known as Andel." Andel was the person whose crime had led to Jubei's challenge and then death. As another wave of whispers rose from the crowd, Gemma blinked. With an unhappy scowl on his face, he said, "As I've told the last time, I am the leader of both hunters and pathfinders. Any crime they commit while performing their duties is my crime, so I will be the one to answer for it. Are you sure you want to challenge me, kid?" Sonny held his breath, knowing that Neff's next words would decide their fates. Despite the older man's heavy tone, she did not even flinch. However, she did pierce him with a cold gaze, then slowly shook her head. "I'm not here to accuse him of murdering the young man from the outer settlement. I'm here to accuse him of theft. Andal has lost a considerable amount of soul shards while gambling, but refused to pay. That is stealing. Since it was done on his private time and not while performing any official duties, you have nothing to do with it." Gemma stared at her, a bewildered look written clearly on his face. Sonny was doing the same. Well, that was unexpected, kind of ingenious, actually. Who knew Neff can be so crafty? By shifting the accusation from a crime committed during a hunt to a misdemeanor that had nothing to do with Andel's role as a pathfinder, she effectively prevented any of the lieutenants from fighting on his behalf, at least if they remained true to their claim of being just. But was a seasoned pathfinder any less of a threat than one of Gunlach's proxies? And would Gemma even allow a challenge like that to proceed? As though responding to his questions, the tall hunter raised his eyebrows and said in disbelief, "What? A, a gambling debt? You want to... Did Aiko send you?" Nephis shook her head again. "No, I've never even met her." Everyone in the Grand Hall looked at her as though she was insane. The charismatic lieutenant was no exception. With some exasperation finding its way into his voice, he asked, "If you don't even know the person Andel owes the shards, why are you here challenging him on her behalf?" Neff simply shrugged. "Do I need to personally know the victim of the crime to punish the criminal?" Gemma stared, clearly finding the whole situation ridiculous. Gemma stared, clearly finding the whole situation ridiculous. "It's just a gambling debt. I can pay the shards myself, and we all can." However, Changing Star interrupted him. Her voice was still inexplicably calm and even. "It's not about shards. It's about justice and law. After all, the law is our only guiding star in this dark world. Without its light, there's only darkness." Her words echoed in the Grand Hall and put a grim expression on Gemma's face. By repeating what Gunlag had said here a few days prior, she left him with little choice but to satisfy the request for a challenge. After all, going against it would be tantamount to going against the Bright Lord's will. How devious. Did she learn that from me? The hunter looked away with regret, remained silent for some time, and then said to one of the guards in a dark tone, "Go and bring Andel here. Tell that bastard that after he kills this stupid girl, he and I will have a long conversation about his life choices." Then he glanced at Neff and said, "And you say your goodbyes and prepare for battle. Oh, right, what is your name? Tell us, that way you will at least be remembered." Looking him right in the eyes, Nephis stayed quiet for a bit and then answered. Her clear voice resounded loudly in the Grand Hall. "I am Changing Star of the Immortal Flame clan." Suddenly, everything became silent. Everyone grew quiet. Even Gemma seemed to be slightly stunned by that proclamation. The only person to not react to it at all was Castor, who had entered the Grand Hall a bit earlier and was now standing by one of the walls, watching Nephis with a complex expression. Her full name was shocking to hear for two entirely different but equally earth-shattering reasons. Firstly, she had called herself not by a human name, but by a true one. In the entire history of human civilization, only a handful of awakened had managed to earn a true name in their first nightmare. Needless to say, none of them was among the thousand sleepers currently trapped on the forgotten shore. Even Gunlog himself did not have one, but Nephis did. And Sunny too, of course, but no one had to know that. Secondly, she had announced herself to be a legacy, and not just any legacy at that, but one from the legendary Immortal Flame clan, a clan that had been responsible for propelling the entire human species forward, not once, but twice, first by helping conquer the second nightmare, then the third. A combination of these facts was enough to set off a metaphorical explosion in the middle of the Dark City. If this was true, then she could be considered to be an almost messianic existence here on the Forgotten Shore. Suddenly, the calmness with which she dared to challenge a fearsome pathfinder to a battle to the death did not seem that strange. The dazed looks in the eyes of all the sleepers gathered in the grand hall had slowly begun to give place to a subtle, tentative, weak glow. It was as though a tiny seed of hope was suddenly planted in the dead soil of their lightless, forlorn souls. Either by accident or on purpose, Nephis chose that exact moment to summon her armor. Numerous sparks of light surrounded her in a whirlpool of soft radiance, and when they were gone, a striking black and white armor had appeared on her graceful body. Everyone's eyes were immediately glued to the symbol on its breastplate. On it, 7 shining stars were intricately engraved into the strange white metal. That symbol, its starlight crest, the crest of the 7. Just like Sunny, many of the inhabitants of the bright castle were familiar with the symbol of the 7 stars. Not only was it carved into the robe of the giant statue standing in front of the impregnable city wall, it was also often depicted in numerous stone carvings decorating the walls of the ancient fortress. It seemed to represent the 7 heroes that had once vowed to vanquish the darkness consuming this cursed land and lead its people back into the light. Sunny felt cold sweat running down his spine. What is she doing? Is it all a coincidence, or did Nephis plan everything? Does she not understand how these fools will react to such theatrics? If they get the wrong idea and start running their mouths about how she is some sort of a heavenly savior, Gunlag will soon come knocking on our doors. What did Neph say? Just follow her lead and try to look virtuous? Sunny stared at her back, stumped. How would he even do that? There had never been a single drop of virtue in his entire body. Meanwhile, Gemma had finally managed to compose himself and threw an evaluating look at Changing Star. If there had been nothing but neglect and disregard in his eyes before, now there was a hint of dark wariness in them. Slowly, the leader of hunters smiled. In that case, nice to meet you. I must say it's a very impressive name you have there. Makes one wonder where it came from. The implication behind these words was easy to understand. Gemma was insinuating that Nephis was lying. It seemed as though this insinuation had removed a veil from everyone's eyes. Most people quickly lost their wistful expressions, once again looking at her either somberly or with dark anticipation. Only now, there were also hints of mocking disdain on some of their faces, and yet several of them were still staring at her with expressions full of hesitant, timid faith. Changing Star did not react to any of that in any way. She simply remained calm and indifferent, as though she existed slightly apart from the dirt and despair of this world. Soon, Andel the Pathfinder was led into the grand hall. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The Pathfinder was of average height and solid build, with menacing blue eyes and a sharp jaw. His head was shaved on the sides, with the remaining hair weaved into a short braid. He appeared to be slightly older than the rest of the sleepers gathered in the grand hall, with the exception of Gemma himself. Andel was probably around 24 years old. He looked like a skilled, seasoned, and ruthless fighter. Every Pathfinder was nothing less than an elite among elites, and he was no exception. Even those who hated Andel stared at him with fear and respect, even veneration. Entering the hall, Andel threw a dark look at Nephis and walked forward to the base of the steps leading to the white throne. There, he stopped and bowed, showing his respect to the leader of hunters. "I'm here." Gemma stared at him with an irritated, contemptuous expression, and then sighed. "You know why I've summoned you?" The Pathfinder smirked. "Some wench wants to challenge me? Good. I was very sad to let Harris have all the fun last time." Several angry whispers sounded from the crowd, but no one dared to reveal their hatred toward the arrogant murderer openly. The corner of Gemma's mouth turned downward. He remained silent for some time, and then said in a dangerous tone, "Fun? Did you say fun? Well, Andel, if you lacked excitement in your life, you should have just told me. How about this? After you kill that girl, I will show you what real fun is." With that, he gestured to the guards that the fight could begin. Andel frowned a little, but then turned around with a dark smile on his lips. Sonny and Cassie were led to the side, where they joined the crowd of spectating sleepers. By that point, there was a considerable amount of them gathered in the grand hall. Everyone looked at the fearsome Pathfinder and Nephis with a mix of tension and anticipation. Some were here just to see a macabre show, waiting with excitement for blood to flow. To them, it didn't matter who lived and who died, although none believed that the girl from the outer settlement had any chance of surviving in a duel against the experienced Pathfinder. Others wanted to see Andel punished for his crimes. But even these people seemed to believe that Neph was doomed to die. They just hoped that she would manage to make the bastard bleed a little before she did. Perhaps only Sonny, Cassie, and Castor knew that the result of this fight was not as predictable as everyone seemed to think. Not wasting any time, Andel summoned his weapon and walked toward Changing Star. In his hand, a vicious, crudely forged falchion suddenly gleamed with polished luster, its edge turning sharper than that of a razor. With a shudder, Sonny realized that not even the Starlight Legion armor would stop such a blade. The Pathfinder's movements were soft and deceptive, betraying years of experience in bloody battles against both nightmare creatures and humans. The dark smile had never left his lips, and there was bloodlust burning in his eyes. After years spent hunting monsters, he looked like a monster himself. However, Nephis just stood there calmly and watched him approach, not even trying to summon her sword. What is she doing? Trying to mimic Harris? When the distance between them shortened to that of only several steps, everyone held their breaths. Suddenly, Andel flourished his cleaver and lunged forward with astonishing, almost inhuman speed. His push was so powerful that dust flew into the air from under the soles of his boots. Sonny clenched his fists. What is she? Just a fraction of a second before the magically enhanced blade cleaved her apart, Nephis suddenly sidestepped the strike and threw her arms into the air, simultaneously summoning her longsword. The ethereal sparks of light passed through the blade of Andel's falchion, forming into silvery steel only on the other side of it. The Pathfinder's eyes widened. Forever. Without anything separating it from the enemy's flesh, the longsword that had just formed from the thin air behind the falchion bit into his neck, cleanly severing Andel's head from his shoulders. As blood shot into the air from the Pathfinder's neck, his head rolled on the floor like a macabre ball and stopped near the steps that led to Gunlog's white throne. It seemed as though all oxygen was suddenly sucked out of the great hall. In the deathly silence, Andel's body heavily fell on the white marble. Everyone was staring at Nephis in utter disbelief. The sleepers, the guards, even Gemma. Honestly, Sonny himself was a bit stunned. Of course, he had suspected that Changing Star might win the duel. But even he did not expect that she would kill an actual pathfinder, one of the most fearsome warriors in the Bright Castle, with just one strike. Dismissing her sword with a cold expression on her face, Nephis walked over to the marble steps, picked up the severed head by the hair, and looked up at the leader of the hunters. Then, with a well-practiced, polite smile, she said, "Oh, it was nice to meet you too." The blood was still dripping from Andel's severed head when they left the castle. Nephis was holding it by the hair, her face as indifferent as always. It seemed as though carrying human heads was not even something worthy of changing facial expressions. Suddenly, Sunny saw Changing Star in a new light. It was a long time since he had last been wary of her, but now he was starting to wonder just how many people had she killed in the past. The facial expressions of everyone else, though, ranged from astonishment to horror. People who had witnessed the duel stared at Nephis as though she was some sort of an avenging angel. The others treated her like a terrifying demon. I wonder, how much soul's essence had she absorbed with this one kill? Has to be a lot, right? But those were just the inhabitants of the castle. The reactions of the people of the outer settlement were strangely reserved, but even more intense. They had never seen one of them stroll into the ancient fortress and walk away freely with the severed head of a pathfinder in their hands. Now, all of them were watching silently, an inexorable, dark, sweltering emotion burning in their eyes. All of it made Sunny very uncomfortable. He wasn't sure if Nephis knew what kind of a storm her stunt had evoked in the hearts of these people. That sort of emotion was dangerous and almost impossible to control. If she didn't know, things could turn really bad really quickly. But it was even worse if she did, and had done it on purpose. Was Neph really capable of such ingenious and effective manipulation? Was this her plan all along? Sunny wasn't sure that he knew this side of Changing Star. Come to think of it, he didn't really know that much about her at all. Consumed by these doubts, Sunny didn't even notice that they were already in front of Effie's cabin. He glanced at the sky, only to see the sun hiding behind the ominous silhouette of the crimson spire. It was evening, just like Nephis had promised. Scary. The unruly huntress opened the door before they even knocked, a hint of irritation in her eyes. What's with all the commotion? Can't a girl spend a day in... Noticing the three of them, she froze. Without so much as batting an eye, Nephis simply threw Andel's head to Effie's feet and asked, "Can we talk now?" Looking down at the macabre present, the huntress narrowed her eyes, her face darkened. A few moments later, she glanced up and said in a grim voice, "Come inside." Ah, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. As soon as the door closed behind them, Effie asked in a furious whisper, "What the hell have you done, princess?" Nephis tilted her head and slightly frowned. Then she said with a hint of sincere confusion in her voice, "You wanted me to prove my strength, did you not?" The huntress stared at her in disbelief. Misunderstanding her silence, Neph blinked, then added, "Oh, that head belonged to... I know whose head it is. Where did you get it?" Sunny sighed and slumped heavily on one of the sturdy chests. Then he forced out a dark smile and said, "Oh, by the way, you might be the last human in the Dark City to learn this, but standing right in front of you is none other than Changing Star of the Immortal Flame Clan, the champion of justice. She just walked into the castle, challenged the bastard, and killed him with one strike of her sword, right under everyone's eyes. By now, this must be the only thing people are talking about." His tone lacked any kind of amusement. If anything, it seemed as though Sunny was just barely stopping himself from cursing out loud. Why, why did trouble have to follow him everywhere he went? While Neff and Cassie were anxiously waiting for Effie's response, Sunny just stared at his shadow, hoping to find some sympathy. Sadly, there wasn't any to be found. The shadow was just staring back at him, full of jubilant gloating. Effie, meanwhile, blinked a couple of times and looked at them with a strange expression. That's right, run while you can. Then she threw her head back and laughed out loud. Oh, oh gods, did you really? This is priceless. I wish I'd seen their faces. Sonny watched her with his mouth wide open. That was not the reaction he had been expecting. Crazy. They're all crazy. I'm surrounded by crazy people. When Effie finished laughing, she glanced at Changing Star with a dark but gleeful expression. All right, you have proven your point, but there's something you should know. Back when I refused to join the host, Gunlog made it clear that if he can't have me, no one else will. Ever since, any group that dared to invite me to join them ended up regretting their decision. By hiring me as a guide, you will be putting yourself in his crosshairs. Are you sure you want to do this? So there was more to her story. No wonder she was so solitary. In the ensuing silence, Sonny was the first one to speak. His voice sounded bitter and dejected. I mean, it's a bit late to worry about that, don't you think? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next morning, they were preparing to go on a hunt. A small crowd of slum dwellers gathered around to see them off, their dark eyes burning with a strange mix of hope and anguish. By now, the story of Changing Star's clever ruse and heroic battle against villainous Pathfinder Andel had already flown all over the place, growing more and more unbelievable with each retelling. Now, these people came to witness her with their own eyes. They were especially interested in the Starlight Legion armor and the symbol engraved on its breastplate. Who knew that the memory of a simple carapace centurion would have such an effect on the inhabitants of the Dark City? Sonny was not happy about it at all. The previous evening, he had a chance to ask Nephis a few questions after they had returned to their lodge. However, he kept most of them to himself, not knowing how to properly express his feelings. In the end, he only asked about how she had managed to defeat her human opponent, who was much more powerful in terms of physical prowess, so easily. Changing Star's answer was very simple. She just shrugged and said, an old legacy trick, which pretty much explained everything and nothing at all. And now they were going into the Dark City to hunt monsters. When the four of them were ready to set off, a sudden hum of voices made them turn around. The slum dwellers stepped aside, letting a tall young man walk through. Sonny frowned. Great, what is he doing here? Walking closer, Castor stopped a few meters away from them and gave a polite bow. Lady Nephis, Huntress Athena, Cassia, Sonny, good morning to all of you. I, Castor of the Hanli clan, would like to join your hunting party. Will you have me? Everyone grew quiet for a few moments. Despite Sonny's dislike of the handsome legacy, having him on their side would be an incredible boon. Genius fighters like Castor were hard to come by anywhere, let alone on the Forgotten Shore. He felt torn. A buzz of whispers rose from the crowd. People were shocked to see a warrior from the castle volunteering to join an outer settlement cohort, and one of such fearsome reputation too. After some time had passed, Changing Star simply shrugged. If you want, just like that, the proud scion of the Han Li clan had become the fifth member of their hunting party. It was strange to see their numbers grow after months spent alone in the labyrinth, but that was probably inevitable. What else did Sonny expect? That it would be just the three of them forever? Stupid. Together, the five sleepers left the slum of the outer settlement behind and stepped on the road of white stone that lead into the cursed ruins. And just like that, the fates of every human in the Dark City were sealed. The end had begun.